So no matter if you are a home buyer or a home seller, strategy comes into play.
Yeah, the market's always changing. You need a custom strategy. And in this episode, we went deep on buyer and seller perspectives and what it takes to win in today's changing market.
The underlying details could mean thousands, to the plus or to the negative.
Real estate. Real estate. Real estate. Real estate. Real estate.
Welcome to season 2 of Charlotte Real Estate Talk.
You've been in coming up on 30 years in real estate.
28 years. It's hard to believe. When I say it, I have to really think back. Wow, has it been that long?
Yeah. I thought it was the 4 kids that had my extra gray hairs, but maybe it's the almost 20 years in real estate that I've been in also. Bananas.
Yeah, obviously we love this business. There's no question that it's hard work, right?
Oh, totally.
To be successful in this business, to represent buyers and sellers in the marketplace, to hopefully best position them to win in a very competitive marketplace, it takes its toll, but we love it, so we get up every morning and get back in.
Oh, totally. Yeah, everything changes, right? If you think of life in general, having kids, my life changed, owning our first piece of real estate, not knowing and, having apprehension at that time versus like the excitement of when we sold it and how much gain we had. There's trepidation in every major life decision, but in the end, if you trusted your gut, it served you well over many moons. And I'd like to think we've done a really good job of advocating for our clients over the many years. And they've also seen the benefit of the skilled, negotiation at work. So.
Absolutely. And advocating for our clients, that is what we do every day, right? So given the current climate and how brisk things are and how we're positioning our clients to win, let's talk about representing buyers, and then we'll get into representing sellers. So currently in today's marketplace, what are the top 3 ideas or tactics or practices that you employ as a buyer's agent to position your clients to win?
For sure. When we go through our buyer's needs analysis, one of the questions is, if we had to roll back the clock and say when we need to start to when you need to move into the property, what date do you want to be transitioning into your new home? When I have that information, I know how aggressive we need to be. But in the end, if someone's made the decision that they want to move forward on a piece of real estate, one, they decided to take action, they're not waiting. And in generally, depending on how competitive the landscape is, which as you mentioned is a brisk pace, then one needs to be prepared for a higher than market price potentially, sometimes a higher deposit, maybe a quicker closing. So if we're in multiple offers, that's going to drive the conversation differently than if a piece of real estate has sat for 100 days or more.
Yeah. So to your point, not all homes necessarily justify an offer of asking price or above, but many do. And the ones that do tend to be the ones in the best areas, the best condition, those that are priced appropriately, right?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, if you have something that's priced well, which we'll talk about sellers in a minute, is absolutely part of the strategy. We talk about a marketing plan. As part of the marketing plan is have the priced well, priced right. Buyers sense that. Buyers have access to all of the major portal and they see the data. They're researching it. Many of them for up to 13 months before they make a buying decision, and often is the case. So people have seen data, they've seen properties come and go. They've been watching the trend line. So buyers know when they're walking in, wow, this is a good one. It's going to go quick. I need to come in hot. And in that case, we're going to be more aggressive, and there's certainly some detailed tactics we want to deploy in that case.
For a seller, honestly, for a seller to be very strategic in today's marketplace, should really price the home slightly below market, because then you are able to attract more than one party interested and hopefully more than one offer. And what typically happens when you have more than one offer, you have people willing to pay more than list price, right? Do you want to talk a little bit about the positioning and the psychology behind that?
Totally. And this benefits the buyers too by understanding the psychology of the seller. That's why we work with both, so we can stay relevant and sharp in both sides of the lens. And as it relates to pricing, you have properties, as you mentioned, priced slightly below the market, where you are in effect pricing it to where if the trend line is X and you're slightly below it, you have more than one party that recognizes that, get excited about it, and they themselves will drive it potentially to a higher price. That is a fantastic strategy for pricing, and buyers need to be aware of that, and they generally are pretty smart and they can sense that. You price at the market, meaning comps have traded between X and Y, and maybe you're right in the middle of that range. And it depends on what price band. If you're at 900 to a million, sometimes there's hard cutoff lines right at $1 million mark. Just the search criteria doesn't go over that based on the data. Then you also have properties that are sitting longer than anticipated with price adjustments. And in that case, maybe you had one property, one comp potentially out of 5 or 10 that have traded, but it was beautiful, had a pool, had all these nuanced things. And the seller says, I want to match that, even though I don't have the same interior condition, the same amenities, what have you. And then you find yourselves chasing the market, meaning there's a race down to when you end up selling it, which often is the case less than if you had started it below market to begin with or in the range. So it's a active conversation that we have to look at and factor in all the variables.
Totally agree. And it used to be where sellers can push the envelope, and sometimes they still can. This is not to say they cannot, but I'm here to tell you that's not always a good strategy, to your point, because all of the information, meaning the comparable data, the market trends, what the highest possible price in a given neighborhood is, public and very much out there on the search portals, the consumer-facing portals. So buyers are more informed. Agents are really going to point out if a home is priced over market. And if they don't compare well to the competition who might be priced at or under, they're not going to win.
It's a great point. And you can sense, based on, we talk about a tactic, the number one thing that should happen every time is calling the other agent involved. I mean, if you're the seller's agent, you want to call the buyer's agent and vet them and the buyer and what their story is. So you have information to share with your client, obviously. Yep. But also if you're the buyer's agent, before you make the offer, it is so important to call the other agent. One, build rapport and trust. Two, find out any information.
Understand the lay of the land. Right.
Exactly.
What are the rules of engagement?
Totally.
Yeah. And it also shows that you are professional and you are going to be someone that is a good cooperative agent, right? That matters too.
We've heard it time again that folks have said in a competitive offer that, yeah, you called. And based on your email with having all of the offer details, and you just seem like you had it all put together. That's the best case scenario. The worst case scenario as a listing agent is to receive an offer that's via text. Like it doesn't show professionalism, doesn't have all of the terms. Hey, would you accept X price?
Well, I'm here to tell you that we see that in the marketplace. Yeah. It's sad and unfortunate, but that's not how agents should be representing their buyer.
Totally.
Just a blind text without any context, and wanting to run an offer by you or by the seller. I know we make judgment based on an agent who does that and the buyer that they're representing, and our seller clients want to know what's our impression of the agent and how that agent came forward with a given offer, even if it is via text and verbal. Certainly, we would share that with our sellers, but the overall impression is not a good one.
Totally. If they leave the conversation, if you're the seller's agent, the buyer's agent, prospective buyer's agent calls and says, I just want to run this by you. I did notice that, you guys bought it for X, you're selling for Y. Can you help me understand how you determine the property's value, Scott? If you start off a conversation that way, I don't think that's the right way to create a collaborative conversation. It's more of you're asking questions that are already going to lead into a defensive posture in some ways. It's almost latent with, and going back to your point, I want to create an environment where you want to win, but you do that in the lens of professionalism, the right context, when everything's put together, and you present yourself as you're going to be collaborative to work with. Now, does that mean you're going to negotiate less because you're looking for a win-win on the front end for your buyer? Not necessarily. Not all cases are nuanced and every scenario is the same. But generally, the other agent, if you're a seller's agent, is looking for the agent that's willing to work together for an amicable solution, whatever the case. And on the front end, the only judgment you have is the interaction you've had before, which you want to keep it professional and polished for that reason and good reputation, but also the way that they present themselves to the world and their buyers present their offer to you. So It is important. All those details matter.
Oh, absolutely. From our perspective as a seller's agent, if if the buyer agent wants to have any shot at really trying to negotiate on behalf of their buyer in a fruitful way, doing the research, putting the offer together in an organized fashion, presenting it to us as a listing agent in an organized fashion, having a conversation, all of these things, you're in a much better position to try to negotiate and get a better price for your buyer client as long as you're facilitating the process in a professional manner through having conversation and organized offering, even if it is via email.
Totally. And so far, we've been discussing things that are evergreen, in my opinion. No matter what the market does, it depends. If we're in a seller's market, as we've been in for the past several years and likely to continue in our Charlotte market, then we have to look at assertive conversations, being proactive, and it all comes down to education on what that buyer's risk tolerance is, what that property's nuance and deliverables are, as well as like what is that personal circumstance, what does a timeline look like. If they lose this property, they're okay with waiting for the next one, if it comes. So it depends versus a buyer's market, which we haven't seen in a long time.
Sure.
But in that case, where properties are sitting much longer than the median, then there's active conversations of getting a good deal, and and we've been around the block. We've seen some cycles, market cycles, but one thing I don't think is ever going to happen, and I know ever is a strong word, but from my perspective, based on timing, tell me what you think, is that the Charlotte market, even in '08, which was the worst possible time period, was relatively insulated by the downward crash. And I don't think a crash is coming based on what I've seen. There's too many people moving to our area. There's too much industry here, and we're still room to grow in landmass we've talked about before on our prior episode, as well as just development opportunities that we see in the marketplace. So, I mean, frankly, I know we're bullish on Charlotte, but what we see for the future is looking pretty bright.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, barring any type of external influence that is more like global economic or national economic,
sure,
we are well positioned here in Charlotte. And actually, the fundamentals of real estate have never been stronger, right? I mean, with respect to Charlotte, per se, we have such an influx of people relocating, the great migration. We have a very strong job market, financial centers that continue to attract talent, high-paying talent to therefore be able to afford real estate here in the Queen City. And obviously, we've got climate going for us.
Totally.
Usually Charlotte, Raleigh, Nashville, and maybe Austin are usually in the same conversation for which people are moving to from these other markets. But yeah, barring any type of external influence, we're well positioned.
Totally. And even on that note, like I think of markets like New York that is highly tied in some ways to the stock market. The stock market goes down as a really bearish, viewpoint. A lot of the real estate does tend to coincide with that, one way or the other.
I would also say sometimes in the ultra lux, then there is a correlation as to how the markets are doing, and then as to whether or not those people are buying homes or investing.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. And we have an expansion team in Asheville, North Carolina, servicing the Western North Carolina area. A lot of second homes, a lot of vacation homes. We have an office opening up there, which is super exciting. We'll get into later. But, what we see from that standpoint, we see folks that in that market, if the stock market particularly has gone down, maybe in that also they're considering, maybe now I just want to kind of wait, research, and then see on whether or not you make a move or not.
Well, over time, we've found that lifestyle is the big driver, even more so than interest rates. And whether that's lifestyle for downsizers or empty nesters or lifestyle for, as we mentioned in a previous episode, millennials deciding that they're done renting and want to get into the home ownership position. Over time, lifestyle will win out over timing with respect to interest rates. And even in the current climate where, rates are still somewhat elevated, we're still seeing people in the housing market paying cash or bringing a lot of money to the table to limit how much interest they might pay on a mortgage.
That's a great point. People have talked about too, what's better than interest rate is having a paid off mortgage. There's 0% interest on that.
Yeah.
And the
You can't beat
stats-
zero.
No, you can't beat zero. And the stat shocked me, Scott, that I heard recently that almost half of the U.S. housing homeownership data came back as they own it free and clear.
Yeah.
There's no crash happening when
Yeah.
you own your house free and clear.
Sure. Yeah. The what is the silver tsunami? Is that the term?
That's the term.
Yeah. It's the baby boomers who have they've paid off their home. They're living in it free and clear. Some of those homes we'll see come on the market here in 2024 and beyond. Some of those folks are opting to age in place, or even in some cases add accessory structures for family members.
It's interesting to see that dynamic, of what you see in the marketplace. And, I think in Charlotte, we have the benefit of seeing a lot of different housing stock. We have condominiums, we have townhomes, we have single family attached and single family detached. We have a lot of different classifications of home and housing stock here. I think it probably depends on what side of the city and what area you're in that affords that area, and then obviously there are nuances related to that space. But we've seen that for some time. I remember back in the day, maybe 10 years ago, we were talking about how many more apartments can they build in the Queen City. And you know what? I was wrong, because people just keep coming. They knew.
Sure.
They don't spend millions of dollars on development projects without doing proper research. And these hedge funds are coming from all of the major markets. Charlotte is no longer a secret.
That's right.
And we are seeing that influx of growth.
Oh, totally. To your point, we're always amazed to see how many luxury apartments that are going up all around town in South End and South Park, and certainly Huntersville, Cornelius, Ballantyne. And they're pretty close to full occupancy.
Wow.
And that is certainly a good barometer for how much limited inventory we have for purchase. And a lot of the people in those apartments are teed up and ready to go and are active in the market in searching for a home.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
I think Charlotte, it's obviously we call it home and have been for many years, and certainly growing up here. And I think it's likely going to continue that way. And looking at history, repeating itself in the sense that even if since 1978, 4.7% appreciation we've seen, that's what the numbers show, then the greater MSA around Charlotte. That
we've seen better in recent years.
And we've seen better. That's
Yeah.
the point. The past few years, we've actually seen an uptick even then.
Yeah.
So I still think there's room to grow. So I'm excited to see what Charlotte has in store. And I'm excited about this podcast too, by the way, man. I know we came back. It's been a few years, in the making to get back to where we are now. So we've got a lot of cool episodes coming down the pipe.
Real quick, from a seller's perspective, we talked about how to position yourself as a buyer. How do you best position yourself as a seller?
It comes down to you mentioned the word fundamentals. The fundamentals of real estate haven't changed for some time. People purchase based on how they feel when they get out of that door and they walk in. And it starts with the pictures online, which even before that starts with pricing and presentation. If a home presents well, it's photographs, videos well, it's staged well, presents well to the world, it's going to make a lasting impression. It's going to make a first impression, and you have one shot of that.
One chance to make a great first impression.
So if you have that right,
Yeah.
and then the pricing is realistic within those strategies we talked about earlier, which is either setting the market or chasing the market. If you're slightly below, I think you have to look at what are the variables. If neighborhoods are trading at over asking, but they were priced well, then you have to look at that as a trend you might want to follow. Versus overreaching with price adjustments and multitude of properties doing that, then maybe you want to go the other way, meaning you want to price underneath those trend lines. Mm-hmm. I think the markets are too fluid to make a one-size-fits-all answer as it relates to pricing. It's too fluid. You have to look at the numbers. You have to look at the nuances, mm-hmm. and then crunch those delta to give a range that makes sense, and then understand there's not a perfect science. Our years of experience going to work with that seller, with that circumstance, with those nuances and those variables to come up with a custom plan. So there's not one size fits all.
Agree. And it's constantly changing, right? You have to figure out that snapshot at that given moment to fully lean into where the market is so you can take full advantage of it to win.
And if you're a seller that was on the market and you're coming back to the market, maybe you took some time off during the holidays of last year you're looking to make a move, sometimes there is the X factor, which could be the agent that you hired. And I'm here to tell you, it's not a popular opinion, but if the agent that was hired did not do a professional presentation of the property, did not do a professional price opinion, and have it in the range where it made sense to trade, and the activity or the showing feedback that was given was not positive, then you have to consider when you relaunch the market, people can see the history. So what are you doing differently this time to maximize your investment at this moment in time?
Yeah. Yeah. Gone are the days where you can just put a sign in the yard and just throw it out there and expect to get top dollar. You might be able to sell the house, but getting top dollar is another story.
Ooh, man, that should be the buzzword in of itself. That is so true. And if you want to maximize your investment, and you really have to start with like, what is a fresh presentation of the home? And all it is online is to get people in the door. Sometimes people buy homes sight unseen.
Well, on that note, I mean, if you are on the market and people and the buyers are out in the marketplace, your first showing and your first 1,000 showings are people online, right? Is it compelling enough to get someone across the threshold?
Oh, totally. And gone are also the days of cell phone photos and an address, at the price. Let me just see what sticks. I mean, buyers are savvy. They can see all this online. To your point, they're either going to swipe right or they're going to hit like book a showing. They're curious, and curiosity, impression count does lead to physical traffic. But we do use a strategy related to when we list and delaying that interest to bottleneck the interest, maybe a joint open house on Saturday and Sunday to really funnel people through a point of interest where we're maximizing top dollar, to your point. It's a strategy custom for that home.
Yeah. And obviously, we employ YouTube, certainly a social strategy. Open houses are big, broker opens coming soon. There are different tools that we can utilize to incorporate the most amount of interest within that first 2-week period, right? It's strategy.
Totally. It's all about the strategy, and the approach is custom fit. So we have to acknowledge that. And this podcast is all about the change in the marketplace. And we have seen some change, within the Charlotte landscape as it relates to real estate. But I would say by and large, it has been positive. The gains are here to stay and come. And I think we've got a long shelf life here of the Charlotte real estate space with room to grow. The market's always changing and always will change, but we're here to navigate that change with you. Thanks for tuning in to our journey. We got a lot more cool conversations coming out of the pipe. If we don't see you around the Queen City, we look forward to seeing you on the podcast.